All right, friends, hello. What we're going to talk about today is the difference between trauma and moral injury. So, trauma is what I call base trauma, and then moral injury is what I call moral injury trauma, which means that you can have trauma without having a moral injury, but you can't have a moral injury without having trauma. And so, as I use in the description, imagine if a person is being treated for the flu, but what they really have are seasonal allergies. If the person is receiving all these medications and shots and all these other things for the flu, yeah, it might make some of their symptoms better at the time, in the moment, but every season or every time they're exposed to that allergen, they're going to have problems all over again. And they'll never understand why. Why am I continuing to get sick, to feel ill, to feel crappy when, you know, I've been receiving treatment for the flu. And that's because they've been treated for the wrong thing their whole time, the whole time. And similarly, as it relates to us emotionally, mentally, socially, a person can be suffering a moral injury, but they are handling it as though it is simply trauma. And so if it is always being cared for that way, and then, every time a person is exposed to a trigger, every time a person is put in a certain situation around a certain person or a certain environment or whatever, they're just like, man, I should be over this by now. But for whatever reason, they're not. It is because they have been treating a moral injury as though it is a trauma. So now I'm going to tell you a story, because I like to keep these classes short, because your attention span is probably as bad as mine. So I'm going to tell you a story, and then that is going to be the end of today's lesson. Then you just answer the questions in the comments and we can go from there. There's two parts to this. I want to tell you about a guy named James. James works in a corporate office on the 10th floor. Every day he goes to work. He gets in the lobby, takes the elevator, goes up to the 10th floor, does his work day, comes down, goes home, and is living his bachelor life, whatever. One day, after about 4 years of working this job, he gets in the elevator, and he's the only one in there this day. He gets in the elevator, he's going up. When the elevator gets to like the 5th floor, something happens. It stops moving. And he hits the little emergency button, and the elevator just like shakes, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. He's stuck. It's only been like 45 seconds, but to him, it feels like it's been an hour already. And so the elevator shakes, and then out of nowhere, it just drops down. And right before it gets to the first floor and a half, like between the first and second floor, the emergency brakes kick in, stops the elevator with a thud. James, oh my God, what just happened? So anyway, he's checking himself. He's still alive. He's glad that it stopped. He's still stuck. He doesn't know what's going on. Anyway, the fire department gets there. They pry the doors open. He's able to crawl out halfway on one floor, halfway on the other. And he's just like, oh my goodness. Everything's okay. No bruises, no bumps, no whatever. He gets out, all is well. But what he notices is that when he goes back to work the next day, and for, let's say 2 years thereafter, he takes the stairs when he gets to work. And if ever he's not able to take the stairs because he has stuff to carry, he gets on the elevator, but he puts his headphones on and he just, puts his head down and he lets someone else push the button, and he just rides the elevator until it gets to his stop, and then he gets off. He just hurries up, gets off, and doesn't think about it. And each time when he thinks about having to get back on the elevator or get off the elevator, he feels this anxiety rise up in him. And eventually he gets over it, That was a traumatic event. It was something that happened in a moment, and it lingers with him for who knows how long. But, over time, he gets better. And whenever he's put in those situations, at least at first, it always comes to mind. And that's it. Grateful he wasn't injured. Now I want to tell you about the second person. Her name is Barbara. Barbara, beautiful young lady. And one day at a coffee shop, she met the most amazing man that they just clicked right away. And she knew in an instant that they were supposed to be together. She had to play it cool, but like the chemistry was just off the charts. So anyway, he approached her as she hoped he would. And they hit it off. They started dating. They were together for months. Months turned into years. Eventually, in that second year, he was like, "You're the perfect person. I know I want to spend my life with you." He asked her to marry him. They decide to go forward, and they're having this whirlwind romance. They've had arguments and gotten over it, and they've talked and communicated perfectly, and it was just, she couldn't have asked for a better situation. And everybody was happy for her, and she just believed God was answering a prayer. And on the day of the wedding, she'd gotten dressed. She was ready to put the final touches on her makeup and outfit and everything. And she realized she didn't have her brooch or her necklace or whatever that her grandmother passed down, this family heirloom. And so she walked into her room. It wasn't there. And then she was just going around. And then she went into one of the rooms at the venue where they were having the wedding to see if her necklace was in there. And it was. But also in the room was her mother and her fiance having a conversation, a very intense conversation, one where they were in a loving embrace that seemed more like a mother and son. And they were talking about running away together. And in that moment, Barbara's heart dropped into her stomach, and her throat, like she just felt this well up in her throat, and she just lost it. That was a very traumatic event. So now let's pause. I want to tell you the difference between the two. So with the guy in the elevator, James, the first guy, that was horrible. That was scary. I wouldn't ever wish anybody to go through that. But it was a moment in time that passed. And unless he is back in a similar situation, he will never you'll never see the effects. You'll never see the impact of what occurred in that elevator. However, with the second situation, the marriage with Barbara, her trauma was a moral injury. And what that means is, in this traumatic event, not only was it a point in time, but during that point in time, things that she held as values, as core beliefs, got rocked, were broken, were shaken up in a way that she would never imagine. And it would cause her or any person to, think, why me? Why did God allow this to happen? How could I be so foolish? Everyone that I thought loved me, everyone that I trusted, they betrayed me. And so for her, it's more than just the event. It really shakes up a lot of what she believes, and it makes her question who she is and where she exists in the universe and who she can trust. And it just causes her to ask a lot more questions about things that will be lingering for a lot longer in life. And so you can see that there's a very big difference between the two, but they oftentimes look the same. And for two people can be in the exact same situation For one of them is a traumatic event. For the other one, it is a moral injury. Now, I don't like to make my focus about veterans, but I'll use a veteran example right now. Let's say you have two soldiers in a combat situation, and they are both under heavy fire against enemy forces, and they are both returning fire, right? So for one of them, it may be scary, it may be terrifying or traumatic, the fact that he is in a firefight with anybody, the fact that bullets are flying at him, the fact that he's in another country and that this is happening, it's terrifying. For the other person, that person may be thinking about the idea of taking life, of the fact that because they joined the military and they're getting a paycheck, they've put themselves in a situation that they may not believe in what the cause is. And only for those reasons are they in that situation. And because they're in that situation, they're shooting at other people with, wives and children and families or whatever, and they're taking lives. So two people side by side, in a foxhole or whatever, one's experiencing a trauma, the other's experiencing a moral injury, and so I guess, there's just kind of this gray area, and they kind of can bleed into one another, but for each person, an experience is different. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about trauma and moral injury. And hopefully those things that pop up in your mind as situations in your own life, you'll be able to identify which one is the lingering moral injury. And I guarantee more than likely the ones that you still hold on to are the ones that are moral injuries. Guys, I enjoy you. I appreciate you being here and listening with me and sharing with me, being a part of this program as we develop it together. And I hope you are having an amazing day. Talk to you soon.